Benito Pablo Juárez Garcia, March 21, 1806, July 18, 1872, was a Mexican lawyer and politician of Zapotec origin from Oaxaca who served as the President of Mexico for 5 terms, 1858 to 1861 as interim, then 1861 to 1865, 1865 to 1867, 1867 to 1871 and 1871 to 1872 as constitutional president. He resisted the French occupation of Mexico, overthrew the Second Mexican Empire, restored the Republic, and used liberal measures to modernize the country. Juárez was born on March 21, 1806, in a small adobe house in the village of San Pablo Glatao, Oaxaca, located in the mountain range now known as the Sierra Juárez. His parents, Brigida Garcia and Marcelino Juárez, were Zapotec peasants and died of complications of diabetes when he was 3 years old. Shortly afterward, his grandparents died as well, so after that his uncle raised him. He described his parents as Indios de la raza primitiva del país, that is, Indians of the original race of the country. He worked in the cornfields and as a shepherd until the age of 12, when he walked to the city of Oaxaca to attend school. At the time, he could speak only Zapotec. In the city, where his sister worked as a cook, he took a job as a domestic servant for Antonio Maza. A lay Franciscan, Antonio Salanueva, was impressed with young Benito's intelligence and thirst for learning, and arranged for his placement at the city's seminary. In 1843 Benito married Margarita Maza, the daughter of his sister's patron. Political career: Juárez became a lawyer in 1834 and a judge in 1841. He was governor of the state of Oaxaca from 1847 to 1852. During his tenure as governor he supported war effort against the Americans in the Mexican War, but seeing the war was lost, refused Antonio López de Santa Anna's request to regroup and raise new forces. This, as well as his objections to the corrupt military dictatorship Santa Anna, led to his exile in 1853. He spent his exile in New Orleans, Louisiana, working in a cigar factory. In 1854 he helped draft the Plan of Yutla, a document calling for Santa Anna's deposition and a convention to implement a new constitution. Faced with growing discontent, Santa Anna resigned in 1855 and Juárez returned to Mexico. The winning party, the Liberals, formed a provisional government under General Juan Alvarez, inaugurating the period known as La Reforma. The reform laws sponsored by the pure wing of the Liberal Party curtailed the power of the Catholic Church and the military, while trying to create a modern civil society and capitalist economy based on the model of the United States. The Ley Juárez Law, of 1855 declared all citizens equal before the law and severely restricted the privileges of the Catholic Church. Supreme Court, a new liberal constitution, the Constitution of 1857, was promulgated, under which Juárez became president of the Supreme Court of Justice, under moderate, President Ignacio Comonfort. Conservatives led by General Felix Maria Zuluaga, with the backing of the military and the clergy, launched a revolt under the Plan of Tacubaya on December 17, 1857. Comonfort sought to placate the rebels by appointing several conservatives to the cabinet, dissolving the Congress, and implementing most of the Tacubaya plan. Juárez, Ignacio Olvera, and many other deputies and ministers were arrested. The actions did not go far enough for the rebels, and on January 11, 1858, Zuloaga demanded Comonfort resignation. Comonfort then re-established the Congress, liberated all prisoners and then resigned as president. The conservative forces proclaimed Zuloaga as president on 21 January. Meanwhile, under the terms of the 1857 Constitution, the President of the Supreme Court of Justice became interim President of Mexico until a new election could be held. Juárez was thus acknowledged as president by liberals on January 15, 1858 and assumed leadership of the liberal side of the Civil War known as the Reform War, Guerra de Reforma. As Zuloaga's troops were in control of Mexico City, Juárez and his government fled, first to Querétaro and later to Veracruz, whose customs revenues were used to fund the government's expenditure. The conservatives were supported by the Catholic Church. In 1859, during the war, Juárez ordered the confiscation of church properties, and the regular army, but the liberals had the support of several state governments in the North and Central West and the administration of U.S. President James Buchanan. A treaty between the two governments, the McLean-Ocampo Treaty, was signed in December 1859. Although Buchanan was unable to secure ratification of the treaty by the U.S. Congress. Nevertheless, the aid received enabled the liberals to overcome the conservatives' initial military advantage. Juárez's government successfully defended Veracruz from assault twice during 1860 and recaptured Mexico City on January 1, 1861. President. In March 1861, Juárez was finally elected president in his own right under the Constitution of 1857. However, the liberals' celebrations of 1861 were short-lived. The war had severely damaged Mexico's infrastructure and crippled its economy. While the conservatives had been defeated, they would not disappear, and the Juárez government had to respond to pressures from these factions. He was forced to give an amnesty to captured conservative guerrillas still resisting the Juárez government even though they were executing captured liberals, which included Melchor Ocampo. In view of the government's desperate financial straits, Juárez canceled repayments of interest on foreign loans. Spain, Britain and France, angry over unpaid Mexican debts, sent a joint expeditionary force that seized the Veracruz customs house in December 1861. Spain and Britain soon withdrew after they realized that the French Emperor Napoleon III intended to overthrow the Juárez government and establish a second Mexican empire, with the support of the remnants of the conservative side in the Reform War. Thus began the French intervention in Mexico in 1862. Mexican forces under Ignacio Zaragoza won an initial victory over the French at the Battle of Puebla in 1862, celebrated annually as Cinco de Mayo, 5 May. The French advanced again in 1863, forcing Juárez and his elected government to flee Mexico City once again, first to San Luis Potosí, then to the arid northern city of El Paso del Norte, present-day Ciudad Juárez, Chihuahua, and finally to the capital of the state, Chihuahua City, where he set up his cabinet and government in exile. There, he would remain for the next 2.5 years. Meanwhile, Maximilian von Habsburg, a younger brother of the Emperor of Austria, was proclaimed Emperor Maximilian I of Mexico on April 20, 1864 with the backing of Napoleon III and a group of Mexican conservatives. Before Juárez fled, Congress granted him an emergency extension of his presidency, which would go into effect in 1865, when his term expired, and last until 1867. When the last of Maximilian's forces were defeated. Expelling the French, in response to the French invasion and the elevation of Maximilian, Juárez sent General Plácido Vega Huidaz to California to gather Mexican-American sympathy for Mexico's plight. Maximilian offered Juárez amnesty and later even the post of prime minister, but Juárez refused to accept a government imposed by foreigners or monarchy. The government of the United States was sympathetic to Juárez, refusing to recognize Maximilian and opposing the French invasion as a violation of the Monroe Doctrine, but it was distracted by the American Civil War. Following the end of the war, U.S. President Andrew Johnson demanded the French evacuate Mexico and imposed a naval blockade in February 1866. When Johnson could get no support in Congress, he allegedly had the army lose some supplies, including rifles, across the border with Mexico, according to U.S. General Philip Sheridan's journal account. Faced with U.S. opposition to a French presence and a growing threat on the European mainland from Prussia, French troops began pulling out of Mexico in late 1866. Maximilian's liberal views cost him support from Mexican conservatives as well. In 1867, the last of the emperor's forces were defeated and Maximilian was sentenced to death by a military court, a retaliation for Maximilian's earlier orders for the execution of Republican soldiers. Despite national and international pleas for amnesty, Juárez refused to commute the sentence, and Maximilian was executed by firing squad on June 19, 1867 at Cerro de las Campanas in Cartago. His last words had been !Viva Mexico! His body was returned to Austria for burial. Juárez had no intention to leave power following the end of the French invasion. He won in a relatively clean manner the 1867 election and immediately requested and obtained special powers from Congress to rule by decree. Despite being forbidden to do so by the 1857 Constitution, Juárez once again ran for re-election in 1871. Amid fraud charges and widespread controversy, he was re-elected for a new term in 1871. During his last two terms, he used the office of the presidency to ensure electoral success, obtain personal gains and suppress revolts by opponents, such as Porfirio Díaz. Juárez died of a heart attack on July 18, 1872 while reading a newspaper at his desk in the National Palace in Mexico City. He was succeeded by Sebastián Lerdo de Tejada, his foreign minister.